I would like to welcome you all in this place, in this venue. We are in the Workers' Union. So we are in the Workers' Union. We thought it's a really nice place to begin with, as it is one of the strongest workers' union in Greece. Don't forget that we are in an industrial city. 35% of the national, let's say, GDP is still produced here in the area. 10,000 employees are working around the Triassian plain, around the region. So we thought that this is the perfect venue to begin with. As the whole programming we are investing throughout all these years are focusing on these people that are living here, that basically are working with the industries of this area. So I would like to welcome you all to the Workers' Union, and I hope that you had a really nice experience. Just ground it a little bit yourself inside the ecological side, and start with the first opening keynote. So I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you, Angeliki, and thank you so much for that guidance through this archaeological space. I think it's all about grounding us in the space where we are today. Because where do we find ourselves today? I'm just wondering, like, what a week it has been, you know, with refugees drowning in front of the coast where we are standing now. Wildfires in Canada, which have created the worst possible pollution in New York, in one of the major cities of the world. And then on a very personal level, like with Kenneth, who will join us now online, and 3 participants not making it here, you know, having to go through humiliating visa processes, being threatened that they would be banned from Schengen. One person from Haiti who is not with us because she was hiding from the struggles in Port-au-Prince, and the helicopter from the UN was cancelled, so she couldn't catch her flight, and there's only one flight a week from Haiti to here. So this is the realities that we are dealing with, and the question is, what do we need to hear more to know that change is needed? So for me, also the question is, all those of you who had the privilege to make it here today, what are we going to do with our time here? Can just festivals change the world? Or should we make it a little bit smaller and say, like, do festivals impact on individuals? And I do believe so, and I believe very much in the capacity of individuals. And I think this is what the Festival Academy is for me, like a community of leaders. And whatever your position is in the world, what title you have, what job you have, as human beings, you can lead with every decision, every choice that you make every day. Lead by example within this world that we live in. And I want to read a quote by one of the poet, activist, whatever, James Baldwin, who says, and this is challenging with my phone, love has never been a popular movement, and no one's ever wanted really to be free. The world is held together, really it is held together by the love and the passion of a very few people. Otherwise, of course, you can despair. Walk down the street of any city, any afternoon, and look around you. What you've got to remember is that what you're looking at is also you. You could be that person. You could be that monster. You could be that cop. And you have to decide in yourself not to be. So let's look at each other in the next 7 days, not only with our eyes, but with our bodies, our hearts, our souls. Let's get curious about each other and curious about how these connections will develop in the next years. I invite you all to take your space, to use your voice. Is this a safe space? I don't think so. I think we create together by listening, by not judging, by unlearning, by observing, by slowing down, by asking ourselves why we are doing what we are doing. However hard it is, let us not be intimidated by those who try to make us feel small. Leadership is not about power. Power is invented by those who actually feel small and want to make other people feel small. But in the end of the day, we all arrived with nothing and we all die with nothing. The world needs you, I think. The world needs festivals to counter, to change stories, to create stories of change, to counter stories of authoritarianism, of fear, of polarization. We are all afraid, but we are also immensely courageous. So let's put our talents, our magic, our light together. And as Rashmi said, let it be a joyful encounter. Because I think joy is also something that helps us guide through this world with love. So thank you very much all for being here, for being committed within this space. And I'm very much looking forward to listening to you in the next days. So I give the floor now to Mike van Graan to facilitate this heavy topic that we've chosen, what hope for a community.
Okay, great. So maybe could we ask our panelists to join me, Cristina and Hannes and Carla and Anton. So maybe while we're just waiting for Hannes to come up, a few announcements. You would see in the toilets that there are signs on the toilet doors. It would be Greek to you because it is in Greek, but it basically says, do not throw toilet paper into the toilet bowls. That's what it says. Apparently, it's because things get blocked in a big way. And so it's best if we are wanting to use this space and have access to the ablution facilities over the next few days, that we use the dirt bins on the side for disposing of toilet paper. Secondly, I've been asked to announce that dinner has been shifted forward to 8 o'clock, so no longer 9 o'clock. Those of you whose tummies are rumbling, like mine, there's hope. And then also, we're going to be having a little bit of a discussion amongst ourselves here with Kenneth as well, and then we'll open it up to the floor. For Kenneth to be able to hear us, we are going to have to use the microphone. So that will then be circulated amongst you if you have a question or comment to make. And then finally, just to announce that we're about halfway through the first day. Just kidding. But there is at the top of our hotel a bar, an open air bar, right? And it's very lovely to go up there afterwards if people still feel they have the energy to go and have a drink and a chat and a view of the city. That's the place to go. However, there are two lifts, and you have to use the left lift to get there because it's on the fourth floor, and the right lift, as you're facing it, only gets to the third floor. So, by way of announcing, it's one of the mysteries of the mystery Elefsina. Okay, so welcome to this particular session. It's an opening session, and as Inga pointed out, it's quite a heavy topic. With all the conflicts that are prevailing within the world, and it's not a new thing, conflicts and inequality and racism and all these major challenges that we have encountered for centuries. This is the context in which we are making art, the context in which we are making festivals. So that's for us to begin to discuss what this really means for us as festival makers in our contemporary world. How does how do the macro conditions shape what we do, and how do we in turn shape the macro conditions in which we happen to inhabit? So before we go to our panel, all of whom has had an opportunity to introduce themselves to you, I'd like to invite Kenneth Uphopho, who's in Nigeria at the moment, to introduce himself. Hello, Kenneth. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, brilliant. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here online with you all. I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for putting this together. It would have been great to be there in the same room as you, but unfortunately, these are the times, and I've accepted it as it is. We're happy that the Festival Academy has put all of you in this room. It's a good sign of the future to come. My name is Kenneth Uphopho. Yes, I'm Nigerian, born in Delta State, but I'm based out of Lagos, Nigeria. um, I work in the creative sector in different capacities as an actor, director, talent developer. I also run a production company called Post Studios Africa. We do productions, we do films, TV, theater, live shows, and we run two festivals on the side, the Lagos Fringe and the Abuja Fringe. Both of them are open access, multidisciplinary arts festivals. They're showcase platforms and exhibition platforms. So what we do, it's cut out in four different levels. So we have the showcase platforms where people bring in their work. We support creatives to present work, theater, poetry, spoken word, and all of that. And then we also have sessions where we sort of navigate networking opportunities for artists and for creatives in Nigeria. And we've been doing that for 6 years now. The Lagos Fringe is 6, and Abuja Fringe is in its 3rd year. I think I'll leave it that for now, since you have my bio already, so we don't eat up into the time. But I'm happy to be here. Our work is cut out for us as festival managers to be the voice of the voiceless. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to this session.
Great. Yeah, I'm sorry that you're not here, but we're happy to say that 2 of your colleagues from Nigeria are here with us. So we've got 66% representation from Nigeria. Next time we're going to go for 100. So just in terms of the topic, what we've invited the panelists to do is just to do an initial kind of provocation, 3 to 4 minutes each, to kind of respond to the provocation however they wish. And we've also, as with the participation of delegates, we are very keen to have a diversity of voices within the room and on the panel, just because our experiences are so different, our lived experiences are so different. And rather than having one hegemonic position within the room, this is a way for us to kind of engage with each other and raise a whole bunch of different issues and see how we work towards common humanity. There are certain assumptions that we kind of make, and yet, in a way, that's not what we experience. The Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that all human beings are born equal in dignity and free, and yet our lived experience is such that that is not the case, fundamentally not the case. Depending on where you live, where you are born, you have a completely different lived experience, as we have now just been made aware of by virtue of who's allowed to travel, who has ease of travel. I mean, if we look at the average, I think, European passport, a Singaporean passport, we get the passport holder to about 189, 191 countries without a visa or a visa on arrival. I think the average African passport would get you to about 45 countries. So just the disparity in terms of who can travel directly impacts upon us as festival makers who are wanting to have, say, an international experience. If we want to have an international cultural collaboration and travel the work afterwards, who's going to be able to travel from country to country? Those are things that kind of directly impact on the way that we make art nowadays. And it's a conscious decision that we need to take in order to move against the barriers and the increasing pressures for us to conform to a particular way of life. So, the Festival Academy over the last number of years has made real efforts to increase the diversity of participation, and then, in particular, has had to raise significant amounts of money to make that possible, because that's the other major divide within our world, is that it is expensive to travel. not everyone has the same amount of resources to be able to pay the fees to be here and the like. So it costs money to do good, to be democratic, to support diversity and the like. Yep. Okay. And so this is just the context in which we are going to be having this discussion. So maybe just to start off, Cristina, if you could give your initial kind of provocation, then we'll go to Anton, and we'll do Carla, go to Kenneth, and then end up with Dennis.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. So basically, the title is "The World in Conflict: What Hope for a Common Humanity." So yes, there are many conflicts, and they are all related to scarcity of resources and the competition of those. So I think there is three basic things we need to understand to have some hope. One is that we are eco-dependent. We depend on the nature, we depend on resources, and the nature doesn't depend on us. It can go on without us. The second thing is that we are interdependent. We depend on each other. Our children cannot survive without us looking after them 18 years or a bit less, but not much less. And our elderly neither. It needs our help, our care, or the society's collective care. And the third thing is that the resources are limited. We live in a limited resource world. And these three things may sound simple, but they are not. I think the society was divided in two. The one that were made believe the world was limitless, usually were the men traditionally. They could study, they have the power, they have the illimited opportunities to develop things. And the other half that usually traditionally were the women, were the ones that cared about each other, cared about those men or those traditionally men, cared about the elderly and cared about the nature. And these jobs became invisible. That second part of society took them for granted. And in 200 years of liberal capitalism, those jobs are still invisible. They don't have a value because for the neoclassical capitalism, the value is the price. And these jobs don't have a price. So I think we need to rethink how we measure well-being, growth. Obviously, growth is needed in very unequal societies, in very lack of resources societies. But there is a moment when we need to start evaluating what well-being means, what growth means. Maybe growth is time. Maybe growth is not individual consumption, but collective consumption. So there are many, many things we need to change to really be true to these three things: eco-dependent, interdependent, and limited resources. All these principles are part of the eco-feminist movement. That is, the eco-feminist movement is not looking at the natural crisis through a gender glasses. It's basically understanding that the fight is the same. The fight of equality for the feminist movement or the equality movement is the same as the fight of the patriarchal society, the capitalist society. So basically the provocation is to change the climate crisis and the current crisis. We need to make the world a feminist.
How's that to use 3 minutes, guys? It was really effective. Thank you. Anton.
So it's 3 minutes. Okay, thank you for reminding. As soon as I saw the word hope and festivals in the title, I decided to start with the introduction that that's not the festival and not the art itself give us hope, but it is a hope to survive, give us a possibility to think about art and festivals. So whatever you think about that, but when the war started in your country, you don't think about the festivals, and you don't think about art, and you don't think about being creative at all. Only when you start having a hope to survive, you start thinking about creativity. And this is absolutely unique feeling. I don't know if anybody of you have had it. So when somebody come to your home and going to kill you, and he told you, I'm going to kill you because you speak another language. So you will start thinking about creativity or art or festivals. No. Only when power come, when the military come, not the humanity, and then can stop them. They can stop them. Then you can have a hope to have festivals, to create art. Now there are a lot of conversation about art and creativity. I've been participating in some meetings, discussion as a way of resilience. So I would say that for me and for many of my colleagues in Ukraine, first of all, it was the way of resistance, not resilience, but resistance. So when when people come to kill you, they don't give you any chances to do anything. And when you have a hope to survive already, then you can start doing something like create art. And this is your way to resist. And then we can start thinking about, okay, maybe this time, this war, we will win it. And then we get sure that we will win it. And then we can start thinking about how we can get our artists together and talk about new perspectives. So there was some moment when for me, and I know for many of my colleagues also, we absolutely lost the belief in the power of art. Yeah, we've been talking with each other and telling there is no any power of art. Art will never help us, will never save us. There's so many arts around, but there is people coming and killing each other. So this is the thing. Yeah, I don't know if I should tell now about the next steps, maybe in the in duration of our conversation. But that's what I wanted to start with. Thank you.
Okay. I think this is a kind of subject that always asks you to be either over optimistic or over pessimistic. So I tried to kind of impossibly be neutral. And I was just wondering if there's anything, a time where there was something like shared common humanity in terms of cooperation, solidarity, etc. When you think of Renaissance, for instance, when the Medici and Michelangelo, but those were also the guys who co-funded African slavery. So what kind of humanity are we talking about? Coming from São Paulo, a 12 million people city, where we have many different cities within one. It's very hard to talk about one common humanity because not only because of structural disparities, but also because of a lack of mobility, social mobility, etc., etc. So as I was thinking through the program, I was just trying to say, okay, so what changed over the past few years? And I think that connectedness. So we're much more in terms of depth and breadth. We're much more connected, and the visibility. So coming to the festivals, as I always try to believe that medicine is within the poison. How can we use this kind of connectedness and also raise the visibility of the impact of festivals as a platform for something that is really key? Because it looked like we didn't learn much from COVID. In terms of, okay, can we have a common thread? And maybe when I have a common thread, then we can work together, etc. It didn't really work. Climate change, well, so if we are not learning from the bad side of things and from common threats, can we learn from something that I think is really missing with reenchantment, which is the capacity to dream together again? And I think that maybe this is one of the keys, and festivals can bring much to debate.
Kenneth, how would you like to make an intervention?
Okay. Okay. I hope you can all hear me. Great.
Yes.
Good. Thank you to the initial speakers. Well done. All of you there in the room are individuals, your different capacities of work, festival managers, festival directors, and it's a good thing that you're leaders, but you have to remember that you are responsible for a community, and the decisions that you make can affect or make or mar your communities. Like I said earlier, I'm Nigerian, and there's an interesting thing about being Nigerian. I've always talked about this issue of mobility for artists, and I've talked about mobility even across the continent. Nigeria is a beautiful country with many resources, and we've had our fair share of conflict in many ways for various reasons. I went to school through riots and conflict as well. So I've had my fair share. My fellow Nigerian in the room can testify to this. It doesn't matter what level you are, rich, poor, educated, illiterate, there's one common denominator, and that is being Nigerian is like an Olympic sport. We're sort of used to it now. Whether you're rich, you're always on the go, trying to make things happen. Down the line, I'm going to share how we developed a festival from 16 events to 109 events after a very, very tempestuous election period in Nigeria. I'll share that later. But I live here, and I've worked in the creative sector in different capacities. So looking closely at the topic for today, conflict, I think we should just speak straight to the matter. It's all down to one person's decision. Like I said, as leaders, one person's decision to stay that way, or not find ways to resolve conflict. Ukraine is a prime example. My heart goes out to my brother there who's from Ukraine. It's all down to one man's decision, not to come to the negotiation table to find a resolution. And that's a question for us as festival managers. What are we doing about that? COVID-19 was a leveler of some sort. You remember that time that we all had to sit at home pining for our lives to go back to normal? Yeah, that time gave us a chance to re-examine our relationships, our lives, work and future. There was a relative calm in almost every corner. We displayed such human capacity for tolerance. But immediately we were told that the curfews were lifted, trouble started again. Riots, protests, violence, and every other thing followed. And it's ironic that now in the world where there's a huge clamor or widespread consensus for equality, diversity, and inclusion, and it also seems like we are more divided than ever across race, ethnicity, gender, religion, identity, sexuality, and ideology. I'll give you one perfect example of how one man's decision or one man's bias or prejudice can set up a whole debate and conflict. And I want you festival managers to just, listen to it. So here I was preparing to go to the UK with a play that I wrote and directed, titled Esther's Revenge, an experiential play that I wrote. Chronicles the life of Esther Johnson in the 50s, a Black woman who had killed her white lover in Nigeria. It was devised in such a way that the audience becomes the jury to decide her fate. I digress. So Ing reached out. Are you going to come to be a mentor on this project? I said, brilliant. I'm going to come. We'll try and get you a date when you get back from the UK. I say, okay, let's do this. As fate will have it, my play wins the Brighton Fringe International Fringe Encore Award, sponsored by Soho Playhouse, and I'm so happy. Fast forward to my experience at the Greece embassy. I arrived at Abuja, submitted my documents. I arrived a day earlier just to avoid unnecessary delays. Presented my documents, and immediately that man recognized the invitation letters. The man in front of me just became a totally different person. He became very uninterested, dismissive. I was flustered. I tried to smile through the discomfort, but it was at this point that he threatened me. He threatened to ban me from the Schengen states because he could do so. Mind you, I have previous Schengen visas on my passport, Germany, Austria, and I've traveled well. He rejected my documents and refused to collect them. So there I was basking in the glory of my awards, and this man who I have never met before treats me almost like a subhuman. You see? So what I'm trying to say is the decision of one person can spiral and become out of control and become other things. So our role as festival managers looks like we have to bring these things to account. We must recognize the times and reflect our present realities at our festivals. We must encourage work that speaks truth to power. We must develop the courage to become the voice of the voiceless through our curation, and our commitment and our responsibility has to be like, that we're championing something. It has to reflect across the board. I'll stop there for now. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. We can feel your passion even over here. So thank you.
Now? Yes. I feel like 2 hours ago with the game of our names, lots of things have been said now, and I need to remember everything and try to do something that is a little bit clever and edgy. So I'll try to do something. First, I agree with everything that has been said here. So I had a few things in my mind that I also wanted to address. Actually, the first thing that I wanted to reflect, when we visited the museum at the archaeological site, there was an explanation on one of the boards. And I took a screenshot of this because I have it as a memory. So generating ideas and customs in order to cope with the pain and agony of death, the destiny of life, is a common trait of every human community. There's a lot of pain and agony and distress in this world. We just heard Kenneth say about his past experience now with the visa. It's one amongst many others. If we think of the climate crisis, if we think of the democracy crisis, if we think of the social crisis, the refugee crisis, we are surrounded by pessimistic things around us. So is there really hope to do something? Maybe, maybe not. Is there a space for the festivals to do something? Maybe, maybe not. It's on us to act and to understand the situation that we are around. I sometimes feel that we're very comfortable here speaking to the group. We feel in a kind of a bubble, which is very nice, very comfortable. But how can we reach out to the others? There are millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world that are suffering, and maybe arts is not the answer. Or maybe we are not equipped to bring this kind of arts or culture to the others for them to be empowered, to take decisions, to have hope in the future. So my provocation in this, and you can think of art for democracy, art for hope, art for business, art for climate, art for education. How can we always think out of our common spaces to include everyone around us? And how can we make sure that all the festivals that we have around us are not only inclusive, the diversity, inclusion, equity, and everything, but they are really linked to the communities that we have around us. And in this way, when we are connected with each other, we are connected to ourselves, and then we are connected to the environment around us. So my provocation is more for you because I don't work in a festival. What are you going to do, guys?
What would you like them to do?
First, I think it's a question of realizing it. If you all genuinely understand that you have a role and you have a responsibility in this, I think you are all on the right path. And then it's about sharing experiences, see what works in the global commons, what works for our common humanity. Be as diverse as possible to include the positions from the global south, the global north, the different genders, the different origins, religions. If I can say a few words about the work that I do for the organization that I have here in Greece, when the kids are on stage, they don't care about the color of their skin or their religion or the backgrounds or the status. They are just here to perform all together. How can we bring this as a spirit, an overall spirit for the festivals? And I think that in terms of big vision, how you are thinking already about these questions is already something that is good on the table.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to come back to what Carla was asking earlier about whether there's ever been a time in humanity's history where there's been a common humanity. I think that certainly is a valid question, but I think the reason why we are asking the question today is because never has humanity faced the kind of existential crises that it faces today that it might have faced before. Maybe with the Black Death, the pandemic, and so on. But we have faced a pandemic recently, but we also face climate change as a real threat to human existence. We face nuclear war as a major threat to our kind of existence. So I suppose this is the reason why we're reflecting a little bit about, and this is why we also here in these 7 days, as we've made clear as well, it's not so much about how to make a festival. It's to allow us 7 days together to reflect on the big questions that we don't have time to reflect on. It may be that we think about them in the way that Anton was saying earlier, where because of the urgency of their situation, they've been forced to confront particular issues because it's an existential threat that is very real. So what does art mean when your life could be taken away the next day? As opposed to, so we don't necessarily all face that kind of existential threat on a daily basis. So this is about bringing us into a room to allow us the space to think through these things. What does art mean in these kinds of spaces? And even if we do not face that threat ourselves, what does it mean for us to be in solidarity with each other? For people who face that threat. Cristina, you look like you are wanting to say something.
No, I like what Anton said about, he started believing against in art when hope came. And I think what art or imagination can do is, like Rebecca Solnit, the American writer and thinker said, she said like, the crisis, the war against the machinery, like the climate change, like any machinery, is a war of ideas, of imagination, of changing our narrative. Ukraine will face a moment when they will need to rebuild it themselves. They will need to imagine how they want to be with decolonizing from Russia, for example. And that demands imagination, art. And I think what we do in festivals, in art practices, is creating the space for that, to think, to imagine. I think, we at the moment, if we think about our future, the growth is a very unsexy word. What is the growth? Have less? It's not have less, it's have different, it's measure things differently. Or all what we think about beyond the climate crisis is dystopia. Let's imagine a better world, a different world. And for that, we need to write, we need to analyze, we need to come together. And I think that's what festivals can create, this platform to imagine together. Our tagline at the Hay Festival is imagine the world. So, and for that, we need to look at the past, analyze, to understand the past, analyze the present, to be able to imagine the future. And the act of imagining is very important. Even the climate crisis, they're bringing writers in residency, thinkers in residency, because after a while, numbers and facts don't mean anything. You need to tell stories. You need to imagine stories. So I think their role is very important at the right moment. It's like Ukraine at the moment. We did a festival last year there. We collaborated, and everything was very urgent. All the Ukrainians have lost completely faith in arts, literature, even in the Russian classics. They were, many of them, trained into, and it was all about survival. But eventually, there will be another moment, reimagining your future. And that's when I think arts and culture in general are vital.
While you do have the mic, earlier on you spoke about there being limited resources in our world. And obviously you're talking about the globe and how capitalism has basically extracted resources so that this has led to the climate changes that we have. But embedded within the structure of the world is incredible inequality. The Oxfam report earlier this year basically said 20 billionaires in the world, all men, own as much wealth together as the bottom 3.1 billion people in our planet. So even if we do reimagine a different world in which there's much greater equity, do you think it's actually possible to bring about a more just world where these structures are, basically broken down and a more equitable world is created?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, I think what we need to change is the system a bit, because what we have, I mean, the financial capitalism at the beginning took millions out of poverty. For a while, it worked until a certain extent. It's not working anymore. We need to change paradigm. We need to change a little bit the capitalism and the patriarchal society, the competition, the wanting more, the way to measure things in value and growth. Let's try another way of living together, another way of collaborating, and really taking into account what really matters: the care to each other, the interdependence, the the connection with nature as well. Nature until now has been like our, we have taken, and never given back. To produce something at the moment, the market value doesn't really matter how much you have destroyed to produce that product. There is not a negativity in minus taken to the value of that product. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if fast food is killing biodiversity. So we are doing something collectively wrong. And then obviously, I don't know, can we imagine a world without conflict? I don't think so. But maybe a more equal, maybe, but what I'm saying is the climate change is everything, to be honest, and everything is result of it's all very interconnected. But I think the fight needs to be, feminist fight, the equalities fight, and the climate change, they all come together because it's changing a whole system and a whole paradigm.
Yeah, but I obviously agree with you when you say that, humankind is kind of bordering extinction if you don't change things, actually. But I think it's still very much limited in terms of acknowledgement. So the thing for me is, how can we actually reach a critical mass? Because we've been having this kind of conversations forever and ever and ever. But, through digital media, through new audiences, through all different kinds of things, how can we actually engage people in a way that they feel welcome? Like when I was saying, for instance, that São Paulo has many different cities within one. But now Mike can know of a slaughter in the favelas that maybe at the same time it's happening, as I am following the war in Ukraine. So I think that things are becoming more visible, but at the same time, the kind of, not necessarily referring to the concept of Hannah Arendt, but the banality of everything is increasing also. So I think that for me, the one thing that can get people together is this sense of wanting to do something, not because of a threat, but because of a positive discipline, because of a positive something. And I'm really scared about the number. I don't know if you feel the same in your countries, but Brazil, for instance, I think is the second place in the world with the highest percentage of neither nor. Do you have the same concept there? Young people who do not study, do not work, they don't do anything, even though if they don't have money, from very poor families, because they don't believe in anything anymore. So I think that for me, the thing is, how can we get a critical mass of believers? Because if you don't really believe in whatever, we'll never change. Even though we know that, but keep going, So, and I believe that festivals can bring much to this debate, depending obviously on how we work with them.
Sorry. I fully resonate with that. And I think that reaching out to the masses, to the massive spread, and finding how to speak to the heads and minds of the people is the approach. Very conveniently, we know one of the tools for that, and the tool is art. So we do have a responsibility in whatever we program in the different festivals, in order for the attendees, the participants, to also change mentalities, have a responsibility in what we do. And in changing the narrative, you are going to have the curious to the believers and to the actors at the end. I'm not saying that it's the only solution, but it's a very convenient solution for our group here. And how you can do that is really by acknowledging again the pain that is existing in the world. I'm not sure that we will have a free world ever. There will always be tension and conflict everywhere. But art can be one of the solutions in order to reduce inequalities and make sure that we have a more humane, more connected, more just world. There was a very nice quote from an American author, Jonathan Larson, that was saying that the opposite of war is not peace, it is creation. So if we are creative, we might reduce a little bit the world in conflict.
Sure. I'm kind of just wondering about what that really means in practice, though, and whether we as people in the arts, and I'm playing devil's advocate, right? I'm involved in the arts sector, and obviously these are tropes that I believe as well to some extent, but they're also big questions that I have, because I think it is by questioning that we can reach a greater kind of truth in a way, as opposed to simply adopting tropes that we all believe in about the role of art is to do this, and artists can do this, and artists should do that, and art can do this. And you have to ask the questions, well, really? Because I think it goes to the question that was asked earlier. You know, the European Festival Association comes out of the Second World War. The International Theatre Institute comes out of that time. International Council of Museums all come out of the Second World War era as these international kind of bodies to bring people together, to do all the kinds of things that we are talking about now, 75 years later, about the role that the arts can play. And yet, 75 years later, here we are with a war in Ukraine. I was just wondering, and not only the war in Ukraine, but elsewhere as well. So one has to ask the hard questions about what role can the arts really play? What should we be playing? Because there's a double-edged thing. On the one hand, it requires the artist to do a whole lot more work in the political space. And very often, arts people don't want to engage around issues of policy, around the macro issues. Their concerns are, how do I pay the rent at the end of the month? I want to be creative. I'm already so marginalized in my society. You know, I don't want to have to deal with all of those kinds of things. And so we get into our silos and we get into our ivory towers and we don't engage. And I think what you were saying earlier is the challenge to us as festival makers, as people in the arts, and that is, how do we build solidarity with other sectors of our society in order to bring about change, as opposed to seeing ourselves as being, we are the drivers of change, we must make the changes, we must do it in concert with others. But it was also coming back to an earlier point that you made about the visibility. We're in the world today where things are a whole lot more visible because of media. But at the same time, the other edge of that is that things become so much more normalized so much more quickly. So the Ukraine war came into our rooms at a certain time, you know, and now because it's there every night, we turn it off. We go on to something else. We go, and so it's become normalized. And I think that that's one of the dangers of greater kind of visibility. I just wanted to maybe see if Kenneth's nodding his head over there, if he is wanting to make an intervention.
Oh, thank you, Mike. I think just to piggyback on what the rest of the group have said, you know, as creatives, I think the first thing is to, I feel like as creatives, we've sort of left the narrative to the media to control. Let me rephrase. You know, during COVID, all the health workers got all the applause and all of that, you know, for the hard work that they did during COVID. And it's a good thing. And I'm not, you know, kicking against that. But I think the creatives at the time also helped to help people adjust. We created work to help people get through those times, you know. Right now, we've allowed the media to control everything with, you know, with their engagement with tech and all of that. Creatives have a responsibility to also control the narrative out there. And I say this because, you know, first of all, as festival managers, we have to identify that there's not one solution across the board. It's different across continents. It's different across countries, but there's a unifying theme there. In Africa, for instance, the funding that some of us get comes from the same people that we are trying to kick against, or to talk to, or to speak to. You know, you understand what I'm saying? It comes from them. So there's the realistic thing to do there would be how you're going to manage that, where your funding comes from, but you have to address, oh, I don't like the fact that the LGBTQ communities are not accepted here. There's a bit of a dilemma there. As festival managers, yes, we are responsible for creating safe spaces and controlling the narratives, but we also have to develop those communities, like one of the speakers said earlier, develop those communities, develop a sense of ownership so that it becomes a communal thing that we're all trying to achieve a certain goal at a particular time. Maybe that amplified voice can reach the change that we seek. I don't know if that makes any sense.
So we're talking a lot in theoretical terms in some ways and concepts and so on, but Anton, I just wanted to maybe give you an opportunity to talk about and tell us what has the war done to you and your family and your friends, for example? How has it impacted on your lives?
I shouldn't feel comfortable to say about this. I feel too much privileged. I moved to stay in Lithuania because there was a time in June, July last year. There was a lot of requests to me personally, to our organization, the Ukrainian Contemporary Dance Platform, to present Ukrainian artists in whatever forms. And I have been traveling a lot. And then at some moment, and probably mostly know that it is quite difficult for men to leave Ukraine. You need to get permission, and it takes time, and it's become exhausted. There is no specific program where you can say you can write a letter to Ministry of Culture and say, you see, I have a lot of public diplomacy, cultural diplomacy projects, so please let me stay here, and I will do my work there. So that means that I stay in Lithuania to have the possibility to do my work, which I mostly do in Europe. My mother is still in Ukraine. She feels quite good. There's the war is going almost for a year and a half, so people kind of get used to it. It's it's still here. That is another thing that people kind of forget. It is still here, and it's not less. There's not less people dying than half a year ago or a year ago. It's still every day, and it's difficult to believe, but still. So yeah, how I don't know what else to say. I do my work. I create. I work with the dance community, Ukrainian dance community all over Europe. We're presenting artists, the videos, the dance artists. We really do our work as an association and as a festival now. More as we started thinking about that as a way of healing artists, because there was coming out of this idea that your art don't make any sense for the world anymore. But then people anyway have continued creating, and then that means they wanted to have this feeling that somebody really needs this. So that makes changes, at least in people's head. So our role was to collect all of these creators, artists, and give them the possibility to be seen. So Ukraine is not only a country in the war, but it is also still a lot of artists who do their work and who help their country to survive and to find this new, let's say, identity.
One of the responses that a lot of people during the changes in Egypt at a particular point and the Syrian crisis artists had towards people who provided them with funding and wanted artists to be on the international stage was that we don't want to make art about the changes that are happening in our country. We just want to make art as artists. And there was also a time when people felt that, there were the issue of the month, and then some other issue arose, and then they're no longer, the whole notion of solidarity was kind of dissipated. I'm just wondering if that's your experience, or maybe just to end off this part of it before we open it up to the floor, how would you like to be supported? How would you like people in the room, for example, to show solidarity with what it is that you do?
This is a very complex question and problem and issue to be an artist now. Very complex. There's so many layers. First of all, it's a really kind of feeling of not being useful, like that many artists when the war started take gun and go to protect country with the gun, but then others who continue creating, they still feel guilty that they are not there, and even doing something creative, even creating art, whatever it is, at one of there are many levels. Of course, you are proud to be Ukrainian, you're proud to create, to present your work, but at some level you always feel this kind of, why I'm not there? And still, because there are always people who could tell you, maybe not tell you, but think about that. Oh, what they're doing? Why don't they take a gun and go to protect country with gun? That would be more useful. So I think now there's a kind of, I can't say there's enough support, but I think there are enough possibilities for Ukrainian artists to be presented. We also, I'm the head of the organization, and our organization, we do our best to keep connections with the artists and with the local dance communities and festivals in Europe to find the possibility to create artist work. But there's also then come another problem. What works, for example, European audience wants to see? Because then we presented 6 works in New Baltic Dance, and they all kind of reflection at the war. And then people tell you that, oh, all of these works about the war. Yeah, what you want them to be about. So what do you expect? And of course, there are a lot of then people starting discussing kind of a level of professionalism of artists, a level of research in the piece, but this is not the time. This is again because the war is still here. There is no time between the end and the moment when you can talk about that and having some critical discourse, let's say. There is no time for this. So now it is as it is, and this is another problem. How it can be presented. We've been talking about this also at other meetings. So yeah, so curators, as they said, curators need to change their point of view, like how they see works, how they present it, how they talk about that to the audience. But then they say, oh, the audience are tired of war. They see it every day on TV, in the news, but then you go on the stage and you still have the same things being presented there. So, yeah, and I think that's not only about Ukraine. There are many other regions and other contexts which is not presented at the European level because of this. Because, there's no words to talk about that, no gaze to see this, no lens to adjust to this, maybe. So, but the process is going, I think, and we have another problem, but it's now we think about really what we will do after the war will be finished, how we can reconstruct everything, how we can build the new or old, or kind of rebuild our identity out of the Russian context. And we've always been under this influence for many years. So this is the question: how to bring artists back to Ukraine when they feel comfortable being in Europe. This is another thing.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that. I'll give you each a chance to maybe say something, but it is 7:25. Dinner's at 8:00. We're trying to keep the thing going, but also knowing that people are tired. It's been a long day in the sun. I do want to give opportunities for people within the audience to maybe ask some questions as well and to make some comments. So, Anastasia, then Timmy.
Yeah, if I can, because oh my God, I have so much to say about the war experience and all this stuff, but I'll try to tell it briefly. First of all, every Ukrainian has its own war experience, which is completely different. I was able to escape on the second day from Kiev, so I was lucky enough not to see lots of really bad stuff. And there are people who saw their kids being raped in front of them, which is a completely different experience. Would art help those people? I'm not sure, to be honest, if anything can actually shade this kind of experience. But Rier's festivals can definitely serve as a kind of form of escapism to people, to support them, to influence also the lives of those people who were, I'm not talking about war right now, like dream to go and do something. And finally, they have this community of people which is able to support them and help them and develop them also. And also, by the end of the day, the art that every festival director manager should learn is the art of diplomacy and manipulation as well. Because with the power, people who are in power, there is no language as art. You have to be pretty witty and smart ass just to make them see the situation from another side. And this is how it works, unfortunately. I would love to live in the world of unicorns and ponies, but it's not like that.
Thank you so much. I think mine would be around the conversation of the work I do, which is around organizing for LGBTIQ persons in Nigeria, in Ghana, and entirety of West Africa. And very importantly, we live in a criminalized place. We organize our festival in an already criminalized region. People attending our festivals are already traumatized already. They're scared. There are lots of laws we put around our organizing, even up to no photographies, no that we can't document what we're doing, right? Because of fear of persecution, among other things. And I am always, as the festival manager, caught in between organizing for the community and also carefully treading not to overtly expose the community and not to make people relieve their traumas, right? Because when it comes to the queer identity in West Africa, where I come from, there is also the question of privilege and how does that affect your navigation and negotiation of the spaces, most especially as people who are trying to navigate the festivals we are creating, as people who are trying to navigate the safe spaces we are creating, right? And I am forced to ask the question of how best do we, as festival managers, make our festivals also not just a place for people to escape, but also to heal. Thank you.
Talk to us a little bit about the pressures that you personally face. I mean, how do you survive in that space?
Well, for me personally, surviving is a lot of things. Because the first time we organized, my house was raided for 3 days by the police. And I lost my job. My life was in shambles for like 6 months after that. And then that was in 2019. In 2020, COVID came and that helped pick up the physical interactions and physical exposure. However, in 2020, I was still living in trauma. Like I said, my violation from the police was about 6 months on a stretch. The first time was a raid. The continuous one was continuous harassment. I've been beaten. It was given to me by the Nigerian police from beating, among other things. And I am still traumatized. Yeah. And for me personally, organizing Pride or the festival we do is a form of healing for me. Also at the point of resilience to what I am facing every day, right? But that is to me, that is to my capacity, that is to my privilege. How does this translate into the community, which is what I'm really interested in?
Sure. Okay. One more comment from the floor, and then we'll give an opportunity to all the panelists to have a final comment. Anyone wants to say something? Brett?
Thank you. So I'm struck by the way that the word escapism has friction with Timmy's notion of healing, because it seems to me that ways of gathering sometimes have knowledge in them that has a transformative capacity. So at its best, I think, a festival cannot be a way of disengaging or escaping, but somehow out of the context, without denying it, actually looking it in the eyes, but tapping into ways of knowing that can help people move through that. And I think that's a very generative place for us to think about in the days we are together.
I mean, it's very hard to give you advice. You're in a very particular and difficult circumstance. But I always think we need to think we are for the long run, for a long time. We want to be doing the festivals for many years, so we need to win battles slowly. We don't need to burn ourselves. I mean, it's very difficult. It's a very generic advice, but sometimes, when I started doing festivals, I wanted to raise all the issues in one go. I wanted to, but we are all the time doing that balance act between sponsors, between people in the same panel, between creating a safe space where people can do mistakes and people get offended, but as well the person that make a mistake it needs to be in a safe space. And it's all a balancing act. And I think the one thing I've learned is that we're for the long run. We need to win a war is battle by battle, slowly. And being there are many ways you can. We have presented very difficult themes, these guys into a different conversation, but eventually we talk about the issues. When we talk about impunity in Mexico, we don't point fingers to anyone, but we bring Salman Rushdie, we bring big people to talk about issues that relate to the country. There are many ways to discuss issues in a more subtle way, and that's what arts and culture. And I think, for example, arts and culture are very witty. Are very powerful, much more powerful than politicians. We know how to tell things. We know how to subvert. We know how to protest in a way that people don't know we're protesting. So, I think don't underestimate the power of arts. And just the last comment, I think what we create, for example, in the Hay Festival, is we create a space for dialogue, conversation. I think a conversation is the first example of tolerance, and a space where we show the grace of a society. I like what you say, Kenneth, about changing the narrative. We create spaces where many narratives can live together. At the moment, the world is very polarized politically, socially. Internet and social media doesn't help. Things are not black and white, and we show all the different shades of gray, and that's something.
It's Hannes, and then Kenneth, then Anton, and then finally Carla.
Maybe as a last reflection, how arts and community arts sector are structurally, systematically, heavily underfunded. And what is our role in convincing the policymakers, the business leaders to invest money in this? Because it is important. And it's not about having a nice decoration or a nice festival. It actually has some meaning behind. So all this work around the advocacy and how we can really join forces and convince the decision makers, this is a topic that is of huge interest to me, and I'm sure for you as well.
Thank you. Kenneth, some final words.
Oh, okay. I think we've sort of covered a few. Just to wrap up, I'll say that there are many ways to look at one story. And if as festival managers, it's our duty, our responsibility to look at it across the board and document it across the board as we can. The only narrative I know about the Civil War was told to me by my father, and then the things I read online. The story my father told me is it's like totally different from the ones that I read online because of his experience. My Nigerian counterpart or a colleague in the room has just mentioned something. We live in the same country, but I can't tell the story as much as he can because he's there on the ground. You know, what I can tell him is I think we need to get together so that we can rub minds and figure out ways to help you and your festival become better. To my Ukrainian friend in the room, I think that we should explore the diversity of genres. Comedy can tell the same story. You can tell a story through comedy. You can tell a story through poetry. You can tell a story through music. We can explore every option available to us. I watched a play in Brighton at the Brighton Fringe by Betal Oze. It was titled "Goodbye Erdogan." It was a chronicle of just one part of the Turkish leader, and it was so brilliantly told. It gave me an insight into the Turkish control the narrative. Thank you.
So thank you, Kenneth. I think we lost you a little bit there, but I think we got the gist of what it is that you were saying. Thank you very much for being with us. Anton.
Yeah, very often thinking about the role of art
in society. I feel like I'm running in this circle. I think like Anastasia said. I think okay, that would be good if people in power in governments believe in art and culture as we believe. So that's still a kind of a question of being in this kind of bubble of people who believe. And then these people in power and government, they would say, okay, when we want to find some important decision, we need to give money not to our army, not to military, but to culture and art. And start from here.
and then half of the budget from the military go to culture and art. I think, oh, great! That how beautiful work that would be. But then I think, okay, but then if money go from government directly to art, then it become propaganda. Then they would do what they expected that people would do. So then that means that the art that really makes changes could be created only by independent artists who get money or don't get at all, but gets from some independent sources. So yeah, and with all these thoughts, every time when I got depressed somehow, but for a very short time, I go to make art because still I know that for me it is a cure, it is a way of healing, it is a way to find myself, to be myself. I think this means that I believe in the power of art. So this is the my word, my last word here.
Just interesting point about whether to give money to the military or to the arts. I was in a conference once where some research agency said that actually the military of the US has a larger budget for the arts than what the National Endowment for the Arts has, because they kind of recognize that after the war, after you go into Iraq and you bomb all of those places, you ultimately need to win the hearts and minds of people. And you can't win the hearts and minds of people through a barrel of a gun. You need to do it in far more creative ways, and that's where the arts come in. But it's an interesting point that came to mind. Carla.
Yeah, there are so many subjects here discussing, but no, I always try to, as Anastasia was saying, I was just wondering how we can try to have this ambush marketing of arts everywhere you go. and talking about public policy and how we can show that there are so many different impacts of what we do, talking about arts and cultural festivals specifically. So we're discussing during our visit or tour in the archaeological site why the city really had this bet that this will make a change in a city in transition, right? So this is, and the first thing I asked us was, what about the indicators? What kind of evaluation do you do? Because we need to learn more of this. And so I think that this is one of the more special platforms we can use as Festival Academy to exchange this kind of learnings. And one of the things that I was thinking this morning, I was listening to a philosopher talking about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. And obviously the whole thing in her view, and she was really kind of outraged by the fact that people would say, okay, philosophy is gone. And she said, no, on the contrary, because now we need to understand that intuition and creativity and capacity of imagination and interpretation of symbols is even more important than it was before, because this is what really made. So I was just thinking, would there be an opportunity for us to show our arts and cultural festivals as a way to counterbalance this presence, omnipresence of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, and to show our politicians that, you know, investing in arts can also bring this critical society into a new stage. So I'm always trying, and I think this is an interesting thing, trying to find ways to bring arts and culture into the minds of people who are really worried about something. So what's the something people are worried about today? And I think it's artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. So maybe there's an opportunity there.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. So, Book, I mean, I'm not going to be bright and draw conclusions out of this particular panel discussion, because that's not what the purpose of an opening keynote is. It really is about being provocative at the beginning of our times together. It's to begin to raise the questions that we will begin to grapple with over the next 7 days. So for having done that, please join me in thanking our panelists, Anton and Carla and Kenneth and Cristina and Anis. Thank you very much for being here. Now over to Inga and Ma to guide us as to where we go next for dinner.
Yes, and I wanted to give a very special thanks to Kenneth for making the time to join us online. Like, hearing you talk, it makes me even more sad that you are not here. And I really, because also we have a lot of people coming from your region. So this is also a reason why we want to have representation, because it's about this pluralism, you know, these different perspectives that we want to listen to in the next 7 days. And maybe to just end the conversation, like I was having a conversation with an academic who is also having an artivism organization at a certain point. And at a certain point, we were asking ourselves, imagine that because we always think of ourselves also, are we failing? You know, don't we have enough outreach? Don't we have enough impact? But at a certain moment, we questioned ourselves, what would the world look like if we didn't exist? If all these people who are making this effort every day, you know, to bring people together, to reflect on these things, to bring new ideas to their festivals, to counter these narratives, what would the world look like? So let's continue. And there are 1,400 people in the Festival Academy at this time from more than 100 countries. If you look at the audiences that they represent, let's use this collective also to, as we say, like to advocate, to raise more money in ways. I mean, the world goes in an opposite direction, I think, but we can use these platforms to stand stronger together. And it's not only about money, it's also about the resources in human beings, you know, to be together, to not feel alone, to stay motivated, to be connected, to visit each other's festivals, to exchange, to meet people that we only hear about in the media, and these are the things, I think. So thank you very much. I think we walk all together. So I think we just, on a practical level, it's kind of easy. We go out, we follow each other. The restaurant is 1 minute away, and we can have a drink. So yes, 1 minute. Thank you so much, everybody, also for your attention.